Join Move for Meals, a month-long fitness and fundraising challenge supporting food and friends. This October, you can walk, run, or bike wherever you are to help neighbors living with serious illnesses. Every $10 you raise provides one medically tailored meal delivered right to someone's home. With weekly wellness themes and fun challenges, Move for Meals is a chance to meet your fitness goals while fueling compassion in our community. Sign up today and make every step count at p2p.onecause.com/moveformeals or visit foodandfriends.org.
Hey, it's Mike here. I'm one of your hosts at CityCast DC. And you know from listening to this show that we love DC and that we love helping you understand it and be more a part of it. But the only reason this show works is because of you. You tune in because you're genuinely invested in our local conversation. If I had to guess, you're probably someone who shops local whenever possible. You've probably signed a petition or two to help out your neighbors. You might be the go-to friend for local gossip. And I wouldn't be surprised if you carry your library card around wherever you go. If this sounds like you, I'd like to invite you to join CityCast DC Neighbors. Our membership program is designed to help folks like you who care about our city engage more deeply with life here. You'll get invites to members-only events, our curated weekly roundup of the best things to do in the city, and the chance to share what you love about DC on our podcast. Plus, your membership directly supports the people making this podcast, so we can keep bringing you the local stories that matter. Become a CityCast DC neighbor for $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. And thank you so much. Oh, and now through October 3rd, when you sign up, you get this awesome tote that says Neighbors Make DC, because it's true. When neighbors show up, our community thrives. Join today and get the tote at membership.citycast.fm.
Today on CityCast DC. Federal immigration crackdowns are adding even more strain to DC's already fragile and not to mention costly childcare system. Now, many childcare workers are worried that they could be targeted. Reporter Chabeli Carrazana from the 19th breaks down what this all means for families and childcare providers in the city. Today's Wednesday, September 24th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. And before we get to today's conversation, I want to let y'all know that it is fall membership season. Right, Annie?
It is, and it's the best time of the year I can think of to become a CityCast DC member.
You know, the podcast that you're listening to is totally free to enjoy, but we do need your support to make it happen. You can support this show for just $10 a month or $100 a year by becoming a CityCast DC neighbor at membership.citycast.fm.
Yeah, you know, at CityCast DC, we're really all about this mandate that better neighbors make better cities. And I think, you know, this is something that you and I have talked a lot about, Bridget, on this podcast and outside of it, how the federal takeover in this city and everything that's happened in this city recently has really made us feel more connected than ever to DC and really more of a sense of mission than ever of telling these types of stories. And so that's why we're really excited to be pushing this membership campaign right now, because we really feel that our mandate has never been stronger and more important.
Exactly. I am all about being a good neighbor in DC, whether that means waving and smiling at your neighbors when you see them or making sure your trash area outside is secure and clean so we can finally win the war against the rats.
I mean, that's a losing battle, but like maybe we will, you know?
And becoming a CityCast DC neighbor is really just one more way that you can be a good neighbor by supporting this team of locals just like me and Annie who make this show happen every single day. So if that sounds like something that you would like to support, just head on over to membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm.
Thank you so much.
Chabeli, thanks so much for joining us today. I have to tell you, the 19th is one of my favorite outlets out there. Y'all are doing some of the best work at the intersection of gender and what's going on today in the country.
Oh, thank you so much for that.
So you cover childcare and the economy. How do you see those two things intersecting here in DC?
Well, I mean, gender is really the story, right, with both of those. The way that we've been thinking about it with DC in particular is, you know, we know that our childcare workforce in this country is predominantly women of color. It has a lot of Latinas especially. And in DC, that is even more true, right? 1 in 5 childcare workers in this country are immigrants, which is a stat that I don't know most people realize or think about as this being one of those industries that has a really high concentration of immigrants. But in big cities like DC, it's even higher than that. So it's around 40% of childcare workers in DC are immigrants. Almost all of them are women. It's an industry that is really gendered, just nationwide. Almost all childcare workers are women, something like 95%. And so that's why we focus on it at the 19th. It's a big gender story. And in this moment, it's a big immigration story, given all that we have seen take place over the past couple of weeks over in the district.
So let's talk about that. We know that the safety emergency in DC is over for now, but when it came to DC's childcare workers, this community that really is propping up how anything gets done in DC, what was happening to them over this period?
It's been a period of a lot of uncertainty and fear, and this isn't just true for childcare workers, but it is especially true in an industry where these are, like I said, the majority of the workforce. And so we started to poke around a couple of weeks ago just to get a sense for how things were going. There's a number of things that are going on here. One, daycares and schools have historically been off limits for ICE raids. And of course, we've seen more ICE enforcement in the district ever since this sort of crime emergency, as the president put it, was put in place in August. And so we were wondering if there was going to be any ICE raids at daycares and schools because the Trump administration had revoked that rule that basically kept these places off limits for any raids. So potentially it could happen. We were looking for that. But what we found in asking daycare owners and different groups in DC that work with daycare providers was that the effect wasn't that these raids were happening in the centers yet or outside or in parking lots just yet. The effect was that workers were starting to get really scared to go to work. And we were hearing about people not showing up. We were hearing about people being afraid to go on the metro, to use the bus. And that has a really big impact on the childcare industry because it is an industry where there's a massive shortage. There's not enough workers already. People not coming to work affects those centers, affects those parents that are relying on childcare. If you're a parent with kids, you know this very well. I have 2 little kids, both of them in daycare. So it has kind of this ripple effect, not just on the workers and the workforce and the industry, but also everybody else that relies on childcare to be functioning, to be able to do their jobs.
Well, what is the current status of childcare in DC now? I don't have kids myself, but I have lots of friends who are parents. I know it is let's just call it thorny. What does it look like in DC to get childcare right now?
Yeah, it doesn't look that different actually from the rest of the country. I'll give you all a little bit of a primer on childcare because I don't think if you haven't dealt with it, it's not probably a problem that you've had to think about. But just to give you a sense, childcare in the United States is basically the top budget line item for most households if you have little kids. So for most families, it's costing you more than your mortgage. It's costing you more than your rent. And in 41 states and DC, it's costing more than in-state college tuition. So it is extremely, extremely expensive for families. And it's also really, really hard to find. When I had my oldest son, I got on a wait list for daycare, and I was on that wait list basically from the time I found out I was pregnant until the time I had him. There are still 2 wait lists that I have not gotten off of. Yeah.
You found out you were pregnant. Let me make sure I have this right. You found out you were pregnant, and you were like, first things first, let's sign this child up for daycare. Let's just get on that list now.
Before I tell my husband, let me call the daycare and get this kid on a wait list. Because wait lists are commonly a year, 2 years, even 3 years long. And that's been a problem for a long time. It's not a new phenomenon. But I'm still waiting for 2 other wait lists. And my son is 3 years old.
Yeah, your kid's going to be in school eventually.
They've never called me back. So that's really common for a lot of folks, right? It's really hard to find the care. It's really hard to get a spot. And when you do get it, and if you do get it, It's really, really expensive. Now, on the other side of that token, the workers in this industry, because I talk to people about this and they're like, oh man, I should go and open a daycare. You're making bank. But you're not, because these workers are making just about minimum wage. These are some of the lowest paid jobs in the country. You would earn more money working at a Walmart, at a McDonald's, at a Costco, at a Target, basically anywhere else. There's very few jobs that actually earn less than childcare. And the next question you're going to have is why? And that's because we don't subsidize childcare. The government does not pay to cover the cost of childcare. It's very expensive to offer childcare because you need a lot of staff. For kids to be safe, you need to have, one teacher for every 4 infants, or every 6 toddlers. You need a lot of teachers, which is not the same as, like a kindergarten class. Maybe it's 1 teacher for 20 kids. So you need a lot of staff. But you can only pay them very little. You cannot raise the cost of it much more because parents are already topped out on what they're paying. And then the government is not stepping in and covering that. There's only one federal funding mechanism for childcare, and it covers costs for very, 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 very low income families. It's a very small slice of folks who are able to access that. And so that's true in DC, that's true in Maine, that's true in South Dakota, that's true in Alaska. And the one thing that is different about DC is that the district had created a fund a couple of years ago to be able to raise wages for childcare workers. It was doing this. It was a tax hike on higher earners. People earning more than $250,000 a year were getting a tax hike, and that money was going to raising wages for workers. It was creating more slots in DC. Now that is basically going to go away as of 2027. So DC was a little bit of a model for something that, cities could try to improve childcare, but that's no longer going to be the case. So really the story in DC is the story in America, which is that childcare is expensive, it's hard to find, and it pays really poorly.
And when you have this crackdown that we've seen from the Trump administration here in DC, that tenuous system becomes so much more tenuous. It's already a system that it sounds like it's very difficult to navigate and manage on all sides, from the workers to the parents. It sounds like it's making it that much harder.
Exactly, because you have your lifeblood, these workers that are the heart and soul of this industry, and they don't want to go to work. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid they're going to be targeted. They heard from somebody in a group chat somewhere that there was ICE agents near the preschool, that there was ICE agents at the parking lot next door, that if I go into work, I could get swept up. And that is a really big fear, especially because we're talking about workers who are not just Latinas and immigrants, but they're also parents themselves. So some of the things I heard from some of the workers was that, like, what if I get swept up, what happens to my kids? And so that fear is essentially what has been brewing over the past couple of weeks.
CityCast DC is made possible by the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University, presenting the Peabody Performance Series, a full season of free concerts at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center located at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. The Peabody Performance Series brings one of the nation's leading conservatories to the heart of D.C. with concerts and programs spanning jazz, classical, chamber music, opera, and dance. Highlights this season include the Graduate Jazz Ensemble on October 31st, and in January, the Nexus Grant featuring 2 masterclasses and a reception with internationally renowned conductor Marin Alsop and the National Philharmonic. While all events are free, tickets are required for entry. Explore the full performance schedule, find out more details, and reserve your tickets early at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
There is always something exciting to experience at the Library of Congress. Look at loc.gov/events, and this week alone, there are more than 15 free things to do. A talk with humor and pop science author Mary Roach, children's fantasy writer Catherine Rendell sharing her new book, a live concert of Texas Tejano and Chicano roots music, and an introduction to the library's business collections. Whether it's happy hour during Live at the Library, kid-friendly events at Family Days, or daytime programming for lifelong learners with afternoons at the library, there's a program to connect you with the library's collections. So plan your Library of Congress visit at loc.gov/events.
Don't miss Folger Theater's Julius X, playing September 23rd through October 26th at the Folger Shakespeare Library. This bold new play by Peabody Award-winning journalist Al Letson remixes Shakespeare's Julius Caesar with the history of Malcolm X, sampling lyrically and historically from Shakespeare's text, famous speeches by civil rights leaders, and Letson's own verse. Directed by DC-based theater artist Nicole Brewer and starring renowned Shakespearean actor Brandon Carter, Julius X explores the historical weight of Malcolm X's last days and the cyclical nature of ambition, power, and revolution. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by calling the box office at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today.
And before we get back to the conversation, I just wanted to remind folks of all the great perks that come with becoming a CityCast DC neighbor. Right, Annie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not only is there a members only, are there members only events where we can get together and explore our city better? You know, I feel like there are always those instances where you've been here for like 12 years and then you're like, wait, I didn't know that was a thing. You know, I feel like there's always like new niche DC that is being offered to you. And that's so exciting. And I do think that our members events and just becoming a part of our membership community can be a great way to like learn more of those stories and get to share those things.
Yeah, for instance, I had a great time meeting a lot of you all in person at Art All Night in Mount Pleasant. When you become a CityCast neighbor, you get exclusive invites to members-only events.
You also get a weekly email with handpicked events from around the city to help you get out in the community. You get an opportunity. This is a really exciting one, Bridget, that I know you love too, the opportunity to shout out local businesses or organizations that you love. So that feeling of like that corner spot where you're like, yeah, I get to shout them out on the podcast.
And we cannot forget ad-free listening. That's like 3 minutes of your life back.
Plus, we've got a pretty sweet tote that I know that you're psyched for, Bridget.
Oh, I have seen it. It is very cute. It says Neighbors Make DC. And it's just a little reminder that when neighbors show up, our city thrives.
Absolutely. So please, please, please take a moment to support this show and let us shower you with all of these perks we've just talked about. You can join right now for $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm.
Have you heard of any examples of this kind of happening while childcare workers are out and about with children? I know that you said that it hadn't really happened inside these facilities or, outside or in the parking lot, but what have you heard?
Yeah, that is a really good question. It's actually a question we've had even prior to what's been going on in DC, because there have been reports about, there was a raid on these nannies in a playground. And I think one of those actually reports was in DC. There was another one in Boston. There was another one in California. But it's really hard to substantiate because we don't know, if there was no video of what happened and the folks that were involved were picked up in an ICE raid, and then their families don't want to speak up about what happened because they're afraid that they'll get targeted. It's really hard to kind of follow that thread and figure out if it actually really happened. But just the concern of, did it happen? Maybe it happened. I heard something. Somebody heard something. That is already stoking some of this fear. And in terms of the workers that I spoke to in DC, they are saying that they're seeing ICE agents on the metro, and they're afraid to even ride the metro. They're afraid of the bus. They're afraid to go to school. A lot of them are trying to get credentials and further their education in early childhood. And when the school year started in August, we were hearing folks asking if classes could go virtual so they wouldn't have to be on campus at night and potentially get targeted there. So there's a lot of sort of preventive measures that are happening because people are not sure what's happening, where it's happening, and if they're going to be targeted next.
Have you heard of other ways that folks in the space, childcare workers, have been responding to this climate?
I mean, some of the response from the organizations that work with childcare workers has been to try to support them as best they can. So we know that there are organizations that are picking up food donations and taking it to workers' homes who are afraid of leaving their houses. We know that workers are talking to other childcare workers in other cities that have faced this. So, for example, in LA, where this was already a problem earlier in the year, they have been meeting up and talking to each other about different preventive measures they were taking, making sure they knew their rights. If an ICE agent shows up at a daycare, they have to have a warrant to be able to come in, reminding parents to not let anybody in behind them as they're entering a preschool, to keep doors locked, to watch out for anybody that is not, one of the usual folks that they see every morning and every afternoon at pickup. So there's a lot of community support that's happening where they're talking amongst each other about little things that they can do to create a little bit more sense of safety. But yeah, it's really been really uncertain and really scary for a lot of them.
I'm sure. And what about parents? How have they been responding to this?
Yeah, parents too. We are hearing from parents who are having to talk to their children about what's going on, particularly if their daycare has taken on some new safety precautions. And that can be really hard as well. It's how do you talk to your children about, how do you prepare them, particularly little children, about, someone might come that you don't know. And we did hear, now this is not just DC, but this is more nationwide, other childcare workers talking about kids who have parents who don't have legal protected status, and those kids being worried that their parents are not going to pick them up and are not going to show up to school at the end of the day, and having the providers having to talk to the kids about that, the parents having to talk to those kids as well. So it's really been this, because we see so many of these parents that are relying on childcare. Parents who are working in the agricultural industry rely on childcare. Childcare, particularly Head Start, which is the program for lower income kids in childcare, has served these families for decades and decades, and now those parents are worried about, will I be able to be here to pick up my kid at the end of the day? And the other families are having to talk to their kids about, well, what if you don't see your classmate, or what if your classmate's parents are picked up and you see that, or it happens outside, or it happens on the way to school and we witness that. It's not far-fetched. It happened in Portland. A father was picked up on his way to daycare in an ICE raid, and the child was in the car with him when it happened. The agents allowed the father to drop the child off at the daycare center. And so people saw that, and all of those stories are really commingling and forcing these conversations that parents didn't think they had to have with their kids about what happens if you see an ICE raid, or if it happens near you or to someone that you might know.
I'm glad that you put it that way. I feel like it's very easy to tackle this conversation from the perspective of immigrants who are childcare workers. We're only talking about sort of moneyed white people who depend on their labor for their kids to have care while they're able to work. But I'm glad that you're talking about it from the different perspective of those people are also oftentimes parents. And so, I don't know, I think this conversation is very easy to get boiled down into talking about the ways that immigrant labor really props up our economy and our economy would come to a grinding halt without it. But also, it is important to remember that we're talking about people who deserve respect, autonomy. They deserve to raise families and care for their families and have childcare just like anybody else. And I think it is important to highlight that we're not just talking about what happens if a nice white family in DC, their nanny is taken, but that person might also be a parent and deserves autonomy and respect.
Yeah, we can't forget the humanity of these folks, right? There was one childcare worker who I spoke to who has been in the United States for 22 years. She has 5 children, 4 of them are school age, so the 4 younger ones were all born here. And so now she's wondering, what if I get picked up, but what happens to my kids? One of her kids is very young. And so she has had to have the conversation with them around, okay, if I am picked up here's what we're going to do. They had to write out a document that specifically said, if mom is detained, her wish is that we all go to detention with her, because she was afraid of her kids being alone in the U.S. with nobody to support them. And so she'd rather have them in detention with her, which is like an impossible thing to have to consider as a parent. And she had never had to consider that, 2 decades plus in the United States. Another childcare worker I spoke to has been in the U.S. for 9 years. She also has 3 children. She's a single mother. And she has had to retain an attorney during this time period who is the first call if something happens to mom. She has had to have that conversation too around, if I get picked up, you call this person, this is the plan, you get a flight, you get tickets to Guatemala, you meet me back there, assuming that she's assuming that she would get deported. And so she shared something with me that really stuck with me, where she said, it's the fear of leaving your family and letting them know if I don't return, it's not because I'm abandoning you.
That's just so heartbreaking. But I think it really paints a portrait of what these folks are, like the kinds of decisions these folks are really having to make in this climate.
Exactly. It's impossible decisions. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, we need to remember this humanity, because it's not just about, our economy is going to suffer and this is what immigrants bring to our economy, but it's also, these are people that have been living here for many years, have established lives here, are doing really essential work that a lot of Americans don't want to do, by the way, because it pays too little, and are supporting other families to be able to do their work, and are giving kids access to sort of like multicultural upbringing, which is why a lot of parents want Latina childcare workers, right? Because they want their kids to be exposed to other cultures and other languages, and they actually seek out these workers. It's part of the reason that so many Latinas work in this industry. So, they provide all these essential services and do all these important things for the U.S. economy and for this industry, but there are also families that have been living here for a long time and have their own kids and things that they have to worry about. And all of this has really heightened for them what that means, and made them realize that their existence here is a bit tenuous right now.
Do you think that all of this has actually meaningfully changed childcare in D.C.?
It's really hard to say, because part of the challenge with this story is nobody wants to talk about this. Like, they're so afraid that they're going to be targeted. I think anecdotally, we have definitely heard that the staffing challenges have been a big problem for a lot of centers in DC, with folks not coming. How long that lasts and how sort of the what the tail looks like on that impact, we just don't really know yet. But I don't think that makes it any less sort of important to understand or see.
Can the DC government do anything, or are they doing anything to help or protect these workers?
So DC has been a sanctuary city since about 2020, which means that law enforcement is basically prohibited from cooperating with immigration agents. And Mayor Bowser at the beginning of the year essentially, tried to remove that status. And then the police department essentially said in mid-August, we are going to start cooperating with ICE agents, and you can share information with ICE officials or agents if you stop somebody. So the response over the past couple of weeks has not necessarily been to help, but instead to cooperate with these agents. And like I said, DC did have this equity fund for childcare that was a pretty interesting model. It was it had some really good numbers around how it had been helping folks in this industry. And Mayor Bowser as well had in her budget this year planned to eliminate it. Ultimately, it was not eliminated. It's going to exist for one more year through fiscal 2026. But after 2027, that program is being eliminated. And so that's something that the workers are really looking at and are really concerned about, because not only do they feel like they're being targeted now, but also the little support that there was for them in DC that was unique to DC childcare workers is also going away.
I guess I don't know if you can answer this, but what do you see as the future for childcare in DC?
So I think this moment in time is really forcing folks to reckon with our treatment of immigrants, on this policy, on what this means and how many lives it touches when we target folks who are doing essential work. This is true in DC. Again, it's true basically everywhere. We wrote a story about a childcare worker in Seattle who was detained and ultimately deported, and she was working with children who had disabilities. And that's, if you think that there are not enough childcare workers, there are definitely not enough childcare workers working with kids with disabilities. And so again, these are people who are doing really essential work, and they have come to be targeted by this immigration enforcement effort. Most of them don't have criminal backgrounds. And we will feel the impact of that in industries like childcare that are already so tenuous and that already rely on these folks. And then all of the parents that are working jobs that rely on childcare, they're going to be impacted by that. So this is a moment where all of that is very stark and very in our faces, and it's laid bare for us to analyze and think about as to whether this is the best way forward and how this could affect an industry that any of us who have ever touched it know is essential for us to be a functioning society, a functioning economy. And what does it mean to target these people who are working with our kids?
Thanks so much for being here, Chabeli.
Thank you.
That is all for today here on CityCast DC. Thank you to our members who make this work possible. Become a member today at membership.citycast.fm. And if you join today, you will get a free tote. I have seen them. They're awesome. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our great morning newsletter. We'll be back soon with more news from around the city. Talk to you then.